now.
Hello and welcome. Thank you, iGaming Next, for dedicating a day to people, a first in the iGaming space, I would say. Today, I'm here with Mikael Ångman from NetEnt. Hi, Mikael, and hi, Tina Bonney from Evolution Gaming, head of HR of Evolution Gaming. And we will be talking about handling your remote cross-cultural team. So before 2020, a movement was brewing within the knowledge work organizations. Technology and digital connectivity had advanced so fast that so many people began to wonder, do we really need to be in each other's presence to do our work? So today we can say that most of us have experienced remote work to an extent that we had never experienced before. But is it sustainable in the long run, cross-culturally? Hi, Mikael, and hi, Tina. How are you today?
Good, thank you.
Well, thank you. How are you?
I'm fine, thank you. Welcome. Shall we start with a brief introduction of yourselves? Mikael, would you like to start?
Well, of course. So, hi. Thank you very much for the opportunity to be here in this panel. I think it's been a great event so far. A lot of learnings. Excellent. And it's... yeah, I'm Michael. I've been in the industry just short of 10 years. And today is actually a special day. My daughter is turning 14, so we had a bit of celebration. So I'm in a good mood and really excited about the panel.
Nice, for sure. A happy birthday from us. And Tina?
First of all, thank you for having me. I think this year it's even more important the more we interact and share. And it actually gives a very pleasant feeling to have an opportunity to be here today. I've been with Evolution for 2.5 years already. I think it's been an amazing experience and quite an exciting time overall. And I'm head of HR. Currently, duty station is in Malta, but I'm responsible for the different locations. So I hope my experience with the cross-cultural teams will be actually helpful for anyone who is attending the session today.
And in fact, I'd like to start with you, Tina. I would say that Evolution is probably one of the larger organizations within our industry. How did you manage the transition to remote within your organization?
You know, even before I mentioned probably remote, I think it's very important that for HR, you know, it's core to have a very high emotional intelligence. But when it comes to this year, I think the most important thing we all had to concentrate on was to accept that it's hard time. People are going through different type of emotion, different feelings, and different issues in their life. So to be more open towards anything that comes our way, to listen to them even more, to be accessible and have support different based on different locations, but actually suitable for each of them. So I think that was the priority first, to understand what our people were going through and how could we be there for them. As for moving to remote, obviously due to the business specifics, we cannot fully move remote. So we had to partly move remote and follow all the regulations depending on the location and how the government was advising what was happening at that stage. Obviously, for the people who were still continuing to be from the studio, from the offices, we made sure that everything is cleaned at the highest level, that there is all the necessary equipment they may need to feel safe. And at the same time, what was very important and a big learning for us, and I'm glad that our amazing team managed to tackle it, we had to speak to them and we had to make sure that everyone understood why somebody was remote, why somebody was on site, that actually we were there for them and that we tackled all the potential fears together with them. When it comes to the remote teams, obviously, we made sure that all the managers have even more interaction with their teams now, because we believe in working in a quite close environment when, you know, there's creative team and you can jump up and discuss and have the brainstorming session. And this obviously for the temporary time had to be substituted with a different approach, with more calls or with more one-to-ones upon need delivering the equipment to the door if somebody couldn't be at the office that day. I mean, we accommodated as much as we could, but I still think the biggest learning was to tackle and support the emotional state of different people, because based on location, the harder times were in different period. So it was fluctuating depending who you were speaking to. But I think the most important was still that we've literally took the emotional intelligence to even more high level to be there for the people.
How about you, Mikael? Netent also has offices in many different countries. Do you think that your approach made a difference because of where people are sitting or which culture they're coming from? How did you approach it?
Yeah, I started to reflect here during Tina when she was talking about how they approach that evolution. And I think in the early stages, no one really knew how this, for how long it would be and all of that. So, but we've always said at Netent that, we're following the local guidelines. So that was very important to have that message out there from day one. And that meant, like in Sweden, the offices have, of course, been open during this whole period. I think you've all learned the Swedish way of dealing with Corona, and there was a lot of criticism in the early days, and then it turned into something maybe that was actually the right approach, and so that's what we said, and we will follow the local guidelines in all the different sites that we had, and in some cases that meant that we closed the office, like in Kiev and Krakow, and of course hardware was shipped to the employees so they could have a proper workstation at home. But I would also like to take the view on in the beginning of the situation when we of course one was actually making sure that the individuals could work from home, but then when you saw video conferencing tools, the third-party tools that we're using, all of us, we saw I think Zoom was heavily affected, the bandwidth, because it increased from their normal to something huge. And so that just put a lot of effort and I'd say challenges in the data communication as such as well. But we've always had a very strong local guidance, a strong leadership there, because I think that's what's key in this as well, that the managers, the leaders needs to be available more than ever. I think, when you are in an office, you meet at the coffee machines and you just have these ad hoc syncs happening randomly, but that, it can't happen in situations like we're in. So that was one thing, reminding leaders that, you need to book the one-to-ones. You need to see your employees. You need to see how they're doing. You need to listen to them. So I think this goes across for it doesn't matter if you're in iGaming or wherever you are. But of course, we've also had situations in the production as such where people need to be on site. And then, of course, there as well, we have followed the local guidance and adapted to the specific situation there. So it's been very different in Stockholm and Gothenburg. The offices have been open and there still are. But in other countries, they have been shut. And, this is where we are now as well.
And in fact, as you're talking, so many questions are passing through my head. But one point on leadership that you touched upon, and I'd like to talk a little bit about this. Do you think that leadership is taking a different shape? Has the situation that we found ourselves in reshaped the definition of leadership? Does it make a difference? Does leading a team remotely or leading a team in the office, are they different? What's your take on that?
No, I wouldn't say that they're different. I think you need to be more thorough, meaning that, I think when you have a procedure every day. You get up, you have your breakfast, you go the morning walk, and then you sit in front of the computer at 8 a.m. or whatever time that is, and you're dressed like you were if you were going to office. I think that's like just a hygiene. As a leader, you need to have control of your time. So you just need to do what you were supposed to do anyhow. And then in software development, you usually have these daily stand-ups. And I think that has happened as well. It's just that you don't have them physically. And it's not new to the industry that you have teams in different locations. So they have to dial in for the daily stand-ups. So I think that didn't really change the need for a new leadership per se. But I think the leadership, the leaders, they have to be like really conscious about, it's the small things that you actually schedule the one-to-ones, and that the talks that I said earlier, the ad hoc, that don't happen anymore. So you need to be available. I think the worst mistake you can do as a leader is to have a fully packed agenda, like the whole week through, because you need to have time for these ad hoc meetings to happen.
Yes, and on this point, there are so many challenges that come with remote working, and I think one of the comments I hear, so often when I'm talking about remote work is so many people say, I'm spending my day in calls all day long. I don't know if you've experienced that yourselves. How can we manage our time better? Maybe Tina, you can tell me a little bit more about that.
Actually, I would also like to bring the personal example, because one thing is that when your team is fully remote, but second thing is that when you as a manager, you end up being remote, because when the COVID time actually started, the beginning of the year, I was on vacation in my home. I am from Georgia. And it went on a very quick lockdown that I could not actually leave for 5 months. So I ended up managing and communicating and supporting all of these teams, being absolutely away. And I had no choice. I had no impact, even if I really wanted to. So I think from that perspective, the planning has been the key to actually make sure that every team received enough attention and information, that the priorities were set straight, because in this sense, you yourself as a manager who is engaged, and from the HR perspective, I think we are there for people and we love to be amongst people, and to be away was very difficult. So I think what I personally tried to do is that I gave enough time to every team, and I tried to understand as much as I could what they were going through. So for me, priority was their time at that sense. I didn't think it would last as long as it did. But
I think neither of us did.
No, absolutely no. And so the planning for me actually was the key, and making sure your team knows you are available, because at that stage, for me personally as a manager, they knew it was day or night. They could call me, they could Slack me, and I think most of the companies actually, it doesn't really depend on the industry, trying to be more digital. We use more groups, more chats, more platforms. But I think this situation took it to the whole new level, how fast we could reply to these chat groups to make sure the information was flowing. But besides that, do the video calls. Let people see you, because emotions are still more expressed when they see, and the feeling of comfort, obviously, is what we should do. I think that as a strong leader and a manager, you need to make sure your people are comfortable, and you need to create the environment for them to do the job. This is the main aim for the people leaders, in my understanding. So even through the platforms, it's doable. It's hard, but it's doable.
It seems like from the way you are both speaking, it seems like culture as such, or where the people sit, or where the people come from, it is not the factor that really affects the way you manage remote work. But do you think that there is a universal way, one way of managing teams remotely?
I wouldn't say there is a one way. I think every business for themselves establishes the core, sort of like the guideline and direction. Same like we do with values, we establish the core direction of how we manage different teams, how we structure our teams. But when it comes to the specifics, the most important to be successful and to be close to your people is to let them have a local flavor and adjust to the local needs. Because once again, as the situation was different per location, the attitude as well was a bit different, because some cultures may be slightly more emotional, some can be less, but it doesn't mean that they're going through the less stress. It may be just showing less. So you should be, as a leader who is not there at the moment, you should be very cautious to have a deep understanding of that specific culture you're dealing with.
We have one question that came in from our viewers. Mikael, maybe you can take this. So the question is, how would you advise for employees' development during pandemic? Currently, it feels that many businesses put L&D on hold. But what if next year is also tough? Can we wait forever?
I don't think we can wait forever. I think, perhaps starting the broader L&D programs is perhaps not. I think what we have done is that when there's been a specific need, then we have taken care of that need, because there are ways of doing that. I think also these, the suppliers to the industry or any industry when it comes to leadership or individual development, they have adapted their courses or programs as well. I've seen some very good examples in Malta, how they have changed into a fully digital environment, which of course, this. I listened to one of the talks, I think it was yesterday, Michael Hansson. He said, it's all about adapting and adjusting. And I think, that's the way forward, right? And so I think what I'm trying to say probably is don't wait for the learning and development initiatives. I think there are smart ways of doing it, and we don't have to invent that ourselves, because the industry that is experts in that area, they are doing that. So just hook up with the partner of choice, and that there are definitely ways to get the development of the individuals going.
Certainly, I really agree with you on this one. And even pre-COVID, a lot of learning was already set up digitally. So if you look at, there are so many platforms nowadays, where you can access really, really good content. What from the experience that maybe I have been through this year, I can actually mention an example. We had the same facilitator facilitating training in the presence of some of our employees in Sweden, but remotely with a team in Malta. And you could see that the presence, being present with the facilitator does make a difference, unfortunately. But I'm sure that we can get better at this, right?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think when it comes to the individual coaching and development, then it could work really, really well. But if you want to have that kind of program where you try new leaders and put them to the test, and then you need to have that kind of creative environment as well, and you don't get that through internet, basically.
I would like to add on the topic, because all this time we've been trying to become even more digital when it comes to our learning. And I believe this was actually an additional push to switch to digital as much as possible. I agree with you, Marie. It has a different feeling depending on which course are you going. Is it coaching? Is it just a regular seminar? Is it a language? Obviously, it makes a difference if it's in class, if it's online, if it's instructor-led or not, etc. But I believe that we've all learned that we should be prepared, that the development should never stop. And we were restricted to travel. We couldn't go to conference anymore. So a lot of things had to be moved to digital fully. And one thing I would add, for example, besides just moving the learning to digital, we know that team building as is always been about being around your team, doing the exercises which actually bring this culture out when you bond even more, then you have topics to discuss afterwards which are tied to the values of the business. Now we're, for example, testing the game for my team, and we would like to have it like as a team building event. And at the same time, it also provides the overview of the development areas potentially we may have as an HR team, which is very interesting experience for me because I've never done it online. So I believe the market itself from the learning perspective, the external companies are also catching up, and the products that appear nowadays, they were not available before. Nobody thought that they would be so crucial and so needed on the markets. So I think we should try to adapt to this as much as possible as well.
Definitely. I really agree with you on that. The quality has already improved in just months of being, to a certain extent, being forced to move learning to digital. We have another question from our audience, which has just come in. And the question is for both of you, Mikael and Tina. And the question is, have you considered trying to recruit more employees with a digital nomad background? After all, these people are used to working 100% remote. Tina, would you like to take this?
Yeah, sure. I mean, I don't think that our recruitment specifically changed based on that. I still personally believe, and I think this is what our company stands for, is that the attitude and the passion is very important. So if you are a cultural fit, if you're a dedicated person, everything else can be taught and supported with. So for us, nothing changed from that sense, at least.
How about you, Mikael?
Yeah, so NetEnt has been, it's been quite the journey in 2019, to say the least. But let's start with what I'm hearing from my friends out there in the industry and how they look upon recruitment. And yes, I think there is a shift, especially for perhaps companies within digital marketing. I think that there, it doesn't really matter where you sit. You can be a rock star sitting anywhere, and it's just your knowledge and your expertise that is needed. In NetEnt, we've had a challenging year for sure. We had this reorg in the spring, and then when that was done and the dust settled, then there was a bid on the table from Evolution, right? So we have, of course, we have grown in some areas of our business, yes, but that has been more where we need to have people working together. So it's not that we've been opening up to work remotely from anywhere.
It's interesting that you talk about this, and it's really interesting to see to get to know whether COVID, disrupted your plans or the way you are going to communicate. Obviously, when you have such meetings or you're working on such projects, you want to do it in the safest way possible for the employees, right? And possibly not being in somebody's presence when you're communicating that news removes that safety. How did you handle it, and would you have done it any differently? How did you react to this disruption to a certain extent?
I think anybody that needs to deliver a message to an individual, that there is a risk of they're losing their job, that there is a redundancy situation. I think 100% of the cases that should happen face to face. That was not possible, right? So this happened pretty much in the beginning of the COVID, and all the negotiations with the unions and everything had to happen digitally, which was, of course, very, very challenging because the unions, they are used to having the meetings, face to face. You go to their office or you meet somewhere, and then you sit and then you negotiate. But here we had to do that through many different tools. We tried them all. And some were more advanced in their digitalization than others. So it was a real struggle for 2 months. And at the same time, you need to really take care and see the individual that was in the middle of it, right? So I think we established like a daily forum where we could take care of all the employees that was affected by the change. And I think that was very valuable. And of course, then we had the individual talks as well. But all of them had to happen through video. It wasn't ideal, but it worked. And I think that's a good lesson as well. It actually works doing something of this scale digitally, even though it's always been done face to face. But of course, in the ideal world, I would always like to have that one-to-one discussion face to face.
Yes, and it's a difficult task regardless of where you are. And obviously having this disruptor, obviously, I'm sure made it all that difficult on your team and on your organization. And on empathy, you both spoke about empathy, and you mentioned it a number of times. And we do have a question from our audience. And somebody is asking us, how do you balance the empathy towards your employees and meeting the administrational requirements of the company? How do you handle underperforming employees that do have a potential to evolve and improve? So that's a second question.
I believe that the question is not specifically related to this period of time. I think that's a standard question to all HR. How do you find this sort of like the golden middle? I think if you establish that the approach to all employees should be fair, that's when you start to address the issues in the right manner. Obviously, we're all human and we feel for the people, but at the same time, there is performance, there is the work that actually has to be done. I think from the HR point of view is that to always make sure that you are fair in every decision that you make. And second, explain to people, speak to people more, whether it's a positive decision, negative decision. People need to understand why. So I always find that the key in any situation to explain in details what is happening, why it's happening, if there is improvement needed in somebody's performance, how can we as a company help that person to improve? And everything like this. I believe when, from the HR point of view, and I don't know if Mikael agrees with me, when you choose this as your profession, you know the hard part of it as well, you know the emotional part of it as well, but you're ready because at the same time with your coaching, with your support and the impact you can make on the people, you actually change lives for the good. You actually give people opportunity to grow and reach their potential at the maximum. And I think it's the biggest pay that you can get as an HR professional.
Yeah, I just want to echo that. I think, being fair and honest, that's key here.
What I wanted to ask actually is also COVID related to a certain extent. So have you seen or have you experienced managers closing an eye on underperformance because of the situation we were in? So on one hand, managers possibly want to safeguard the well-being of their employees. On the other hand, they feel that somebody in their team is underperforming and possibly they choose to close an eye because they find it difficult to find that balance. Have you experienced it? Mikael, maybe you can go with this one.
The short answer is no. Yeah, there's been nothing like that.
And how about you, Tina? Have you experienced any such situation?
No, not a situation like this. I think what has changed from the previous times that if somebody is underperforming, it was very important to understand what was the factor, because being in a bit of a crisis mode can impact people in different ways. So maybe at that point, lack of performance was actually based on them being afraid of something. And that was the key for us to understand and find out. Was it tied to something else directly connected to their job, or was it because the emotional state was actually unstable and we could provide psychological help or something like that? So I would say the concentration more shifted to that, but no, obviously the work is work, the business is business, and people, I'm actually very proud to say that people on every level in Evolution, actually, they understood the situation, that we were all in together, and the support that was coming from the management down to any level and back from any level up, it was amazing. It was difficult for all of us together, but it was important that we made sure that each of us was actually not left alone in this difficult situation, and we could tackle it together.
My next question actually is on collaboration and cross-functional collaboration and collaboration between offices with a pause being put on travel. Do you feel that the fact that people couldn't travel and be in the same office, in the same meeting room with their colleagues has affected collaboration across your cross-cultural teams, or have you found solutions to overcome that challenge? Mikael, do you want to go?
Yeah, I mean, of course, the restrictions on travel, they have affected, how we work together, cross collaboration and everything. But I'm not sure to which extent, because we are used to, when you have multiple offices, different countries, different time zones, you are used to dealing with it. But of course, I think innovation is probably, hurt the most. But I think we have seen some fantastic games coming through the Net and Red Tiger pipeline during the year that shows that we've been able to deal with that anyhow. But I think innovation when it comes to, having the brainstorming sessions, standing in front of the whiteboard, that's, where it hurt, probably. At least that's my personal take on it. But apart from that, I think, we are used to working, as said, many different offices and time zones.
I agree with you on that. Actually, we went through a personal experience ourselves when the cases were on the lower side, and we decided to actually meet in one country, and it made so much of a difference. So you can spend 2 full days, discussing and brainstorming. It does make a difference. Nothing beats being in person, obviously. But Tina, you also have so many different offices. I'm sure so many people were traveling to and from, so many different countries. Has it affected collaboration cross-functionally?
I would say that it didn't affect collaboration as is, because yes, we were traveling a lot and we have quite a few offices, but at the same time, we're used to using technology at its maximum. I believe, as I said before, we still think that, for more creative ideas and engagement and due to the business specifics, it is important that we are still on site and we are together. But on the other hand, everyone understood that this is the situation we're in, so we just have to shift and make it as good as it can be. So using all the tools at maximum and waiting for the time when we get the opportunity to get back to the travel and everything. But I think it's been going quite well, and I didn't feel, and I have not received any feedback neither from the teams that because the travel was not there, the communication or the planning or even execution of certain things had suffered. No.
We probably all can say that we don't need to travel as much, possibly in the future. Yes, and and maybe you can tell us a little bit more about this. What good habits do you think we will take with us in the months, years to come? Mikael.
I think, for our industry, it's not rocket science, working from home or remotely. I think it's been going on. Now we've seen that, it's, that it works like to not the full extent, but when being forced to something as drastically as this, you see that, okay, it actually works. So what are the learnings? How can we tweak things, continuous improvements of processes, the handshakes when people are working together from different locations, I think there's, you should do a retrospective on this when perhaps end of year, see what 2019 brought to the table and how you can tweak it into, just make things more efficient, more smoothly. Because I think, I don't think that people will continue to work from home forever. I don't think it's good. I think for some businesses and organizations, it works better than at least not the one I'm going to be part of. I don't want to work from my home office, sitting in my daughter's bedroom. That's not ideal for me. I'm a people person. I want to be out there meeting with people, giving energy and all of that. But I think there's a lot of lessons learned, especially just from a year like we have experienced within NetEnt with Tiger. If there is time, I would happily sit down during Christmas break and just take down the notes. What are the key learnings? And and present that and see how we can make it even better for next year.
Just as a last question, because I'm getting signs we have 2 minutes left, but I'm really interested to know what your strategy for 2021 is. Do you think that your teams will eventually return back to work? Will it be a hybrid approach? What's your plan there in a world post-COVID?
I would say that first, even touching on the previous question, is that I think we all learned that you can have many crisis plans and directions, but the world can always put them all upside down. And you may not be prepared because nobody could be prepared for what was happening this year. And it's okay. Having a strong team that trusts each other, I think everything can be managed together. And for the next year, yes, we are obviously, based on the business specific, still more working from office type of organization. But once again, we will be going with the guidelines and depending on the location. But we are not, at least at this stage, we're not the full remote, obviously. And I think it's clear for everyone.
And Mikael?
Yeah, no, I think there will be a mix for sure. I think, unfortunately, that COVID will be with us next year as well. I don't want to end on a dull note, but it's just what it is, I think, unfortunately. But we will manage, and as an HR team, we have a very important role to play in how we educate and make our leaders even better. Just to be able to adapt to the new kind of rules that we're playing.
And I think it's been a great learning process for all of us in reality. We weren't expecting it and we adapted very well to it, I would say. If looking at this industry at least and probably digital tech industries, I think it was handled really well and we've learned so much from it. Thank you very much, Mikael. Thank you very much, Tina. It was really nice. I wish I have more time to. I was so curious, had so many questions prepared for you today. But thank you
Thanks a lot
for joining me. And to the audience, thank you for joining us and enjoy the rest of the day in this last day 3 of the iGaming Next conference.